Hi, how's everyone out there doing? We are in our marathon session, 24 authors in 12 hours. My name's Amy Hamilton. I am the author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals. And I am here with Erin, who wrote this amazing book, From Beaten to Badass. And one of the things that I didn't know until I started talking to Erin is October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I think because of that, I've just been really vigilant now, and I've been seeing so much stuff on social media. And one of the things that's really struck me is that during COVID right now, domestic violence, unfortunately, is increased exponentially. So, Erin, if you could share with us your book, your journey, and talk to us about Domestic Violence Awareness Month and your amazing book, Beaten to Badass. I absolutely recommend this to anybody who wants to learn more about these subjects. And Erin's going to go into a lot more. So, Erin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, for having me today. I really appreciate it. I feel honored. And all the other authors have been doing an incredible job of sharing their books and what they're up to. So thank you again. So everybody, I'm Erin Baer, and I wrote the book that she just held up, From Beaten to Badass, My Journey of Broken Blessings and How I Became My Own Hero. And it's not just a book about domestic violence. I want to really stress that. It's my memoir. It's about when I was growing up, I was bullied and abandoned, and then I had golf as my foundation, a love that I fell in, a sport that I fell in love with. And then I got into abuse, not realizing that I was in an abusive situation. So that is the tipping point of the abuse in the middle of the book. And then what happened after the abuse. So you get to see my life before the abuse and how I found myself in abuse and what I struggled with through those rough 7 months of hell, you could say, and then how I got out of it. So I really want to stress that the book's not just about abuse, because some people feel like they don't want to dive in and read it because they're like, oh, I don't relate, or I really don't want to go down that path. But it's really about my life and how I've overcome so many different obstacles and challenges. And I was never really going to write my book. I didn't think I was going to do that. And then one day God's like, no, this is what you're going to do. And so I struggled with it for a couple of years. I struggled with it. I put it away. I was like, nah, I don't think so. I wasn't ready to dive into the abuse like most people, turn a blind eye to. And then God yelled at me. God's like, nope, it's time. You're going to write your book. And so that's how I wrote my book last year. And that's why I wrote it, because God told me to.
Now, it's a really profound story, and you're right. I mean, it goes so much beyond the domestic violence, but a lot of it is how you cope, how you handle it, how do you recover, how do you find hope when you're in a place that really had no hope? And I think that, go ahead.
No, you're good.
So if you could share a little bit about what was in you and how you were able to look beyond the moment into that brighter future.
Absolutely. So I knew that there had to be something more than all the lies that I was told as a child. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. Whatever that I wasn't enough of, I had to believe that wasn't true. I believed it for a long time, and I couldn't hold on to that lie anymore. There had to be a reason and a purpose for me to be here on this earth. There couldn't just be this, you're not enough and you're not good enough and nobody wants you or loves you. There had to be something more. And so I held on to that little line for the longest time. Somebody threw it out there, and, I'm a very spiritual person. So for me, it was the higher power. It was my God that I believe in. I believe he had that line thrown out to me, and I just held on to it through all of the, storms and the big waves that were thrown at me. And I feel that I didn't have any other choice. A lot of people say, you have two choices. You have the choice to keep going, or you have the choice to give up. And the choice of giving up was just not in my DNA. It was just not something I believed was even an option. I was like, well, it's all up to me. I've been on my own for a very long time. And I was like, there has to be a bigger reason to why I'm here and why I'm going through all of this. And so I really went on this path of trying to figure out what that was. Did I know it was going to be an author and a speaker and I was going to be helping impact others? No, I had no idea, but I knew that I had to be enough of something.
So that's a really good point. And Erin, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing for this month? You've had a big crusade going on, and I think it's very important for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, what you've been doing for the shelters out there in Colorado.
Absolutely. So last December, so as I said, my book talks about a lot of different things. It talks about infertility and the loss of a child that I had last December, 2 years ago in 2018. And then that whole thing is like Groundhog Day happened again last December. And so I was having a pity party moment. I was like, gosh, am I not supposed to be a mom? Am I not supposed to have children? Can I not carry? I was having a pity party moment. I was being beaten down. And I was like, okay, Erin, you're a badass. Come on, you got to get back up. And so on December 27th, I knew that my book was already giving back financially because a portion of the proceeds goes back to those impacted by domestic violence and sexual assault. But I knew that just having, friends and colleagues and parent or family and people that knew me reading the book, it was great, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. So I was like, how can I get this book into the hands of those that need to read it the most, those that need to know that they're not alone and that, they're not defined by their circumstances. So on December 27th last year, I had a prompting. I was like, what if people buy my book, which would be great, and they don't get the book? I send it to shelters and they sponsor the book in their name. So I threw it out on Facebook and I just waited. And within 5 minutes, I had a hit. Somebody, a good friend of mine who actually wrote a testimonial for me for the book, was like, hey, I'm in. I want to send 2 copies to 2 different shelters here in Tennessee. And I was like, great. So it didn't even start in Colorado. I'm in Colorado, but it didn't start in Colorado. And it was pretty phenomenal. I'm like, okay, I've got 2 books that are going to go to 2 separate shelters. This is good. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so to date, we are sponsored all over the country. So every single state has at least 1 shelter with a copy of my book. But what's really incredible is Colorado, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Louisiana, New Jersey, Hawaii, South Dakota, Maine, Puerto Rico are all fully sponsored. And that means every shelter in those states has a copy of my book, From Beaten to Badass. And it's become this movement. It's become a way for people to be the light in someone's darkness. Because when you're going through the different things that I've gone through, especially domestic violence and sexual assault, you feel alone. You don't feel like anybody can relate to you. You feel that this is the darkest moment in your life and this is the lowest of the low and there is no hope. You have no more strength and you don't know if you can find the courage. And so what I really try to explain to people that don't understand survivors and victims is that you are the light in their darkness. And all you have to do is throw a line out to them and say, we've got you, and we are giving you strength and hope and courage. We believe in you. And we know that there is a life out there for you that is worth living and worth fighting for. And that abuse can end here. And it's not your fault that you went through this, but we love you and we care for you. And so I think that is pretty incredible for others to be able to be a part of, because you throw that stone in the lake and it ripples and it just keeps getting bigger because it's one book, but it's impacting so many lives because the staff read it, the advocates read it, the counselors read it, and then it gets on the shelf for those victims and survivors. So we don't have any idea of really how many lives we're impacting with this simple story, my story, yes, but a story that so many people can relate to. And that's what's pretty incredible because we're now in 378 shelters.
That is pretty incredible. I'm going to put your website on here so that people know how to find out more about you. And it's interesting because like a lot of times people use that term victim, but you've really kind of shifted the narrative of you may have had a situation that happened to you, but now you are that light for anybody else who ends up in a similar circumstances. I would love for you to share a bit more about what that is that you convey in the book and how you are able to help people through sharing your story.
Sure. So I was born in 1982, but I didn't come in this world alone. I actually, I'm a twin. I'm a twin. Being a twin is so difficult. A lot of, twins are best friends. Her and I, we are completely different. We're completely opposite. And so we entered this world together. And there was a lot of comparison that happened. And it wasn't just within the family. It was outside the family, teachers and, her friends. And so I just really did my best to kind of stay out of the way and stay, behind her and let her shine because she was, a track star and she was popular and she was pretty. And here I was just her twin sister. I was skinny, short, and ugly. I was teased all the time. And so I just I just stayed away. But the people that I really latched onto taught me very valuable lessons. And I talk about all the people in my life that, was intentionally put into my life, I believe. Obviously my mother and my father, I talk about them, but there was people that really stepped in and they would plant a seed for me. And they would say, hey, you're a good person, there's something out there for you, whatever it may be, but they taught me valuable lessons. So I go through my story and I take lessons of strength and faith and acceptance, perseverance, discipline, integrity, passion, tenacity, all the different qualities that I possess as a human being, as a woman that I stand today in front of you. Those are because of people that came into my life and taught me those very valuable lessons. And I want others to know that you may feel alone, but truly there are people in your life that have taught you something. Even the ugly, I talk about the monster, and I'm very thankful that I went through the abuse and the sexual assault, because now I can say me too, and I can relate to others that also feel the way I felt. And so I thank all of the good and the bad and the ugly and the beautiful, because without those, I wouldn't be who I am today. So for others, that are struggling or have been beaten down by bullying, abandonment, infertility, abuse, rape, assault, whatever it may be, you need to know that you're amazing and you're a badass and you're not defined by those circumstances, because I allowed that to be my belief system for so long. And then when I looked back, I was like, whoa, I had these people in my life that taught me these qualities that I now possess, and it makes my life worth living. There's no reason for me to believe that I'm not enough, and there's no reason for anybody else to believe that they're not enough.
You bring up some really good points, but I want to ask you a question. So you look at your cover here, and my ring light interferes a little bit. I apologize, but
there we go.
Cover, you have this elephant.
I do.
Why the elephant?
So elephants have always been my favorite animal. I have them all over my house. I love them. There's just something so amazing about them. They're very majestic. They're really giant creatures, and they're sensitive. They're wise. They're intelligent. They're stable. They're peaceful, and they never forget. And so with the elephant, I really look to them as my spiritual, like my spirit animal. Like I feel like I'm an elephant at heart. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I really embrace them because they never forget, but they really remember their past, but they live in the present and they look to the future. And I think I need to remember that as, things happen in our past and we need to live in the present because we don't know what tomorrow brings, but we can still look forward to it. And so I really connect with the elephant, and I just find them very majestic and just very intriguing to me, because I feel that I possess the same qualities as the elephant does.
No, I think that's really interesting. So when you look at the elephant, you're kind of like, oh, this is very different than what you would expect to be on the cover of a book like this, and so it's very intriguing. One of the other things I wanted to talk about with you, Erin, is you are also doing some other things this morning for awareness of your cause. And if you wanted to talk about the different, I think there are podcasts that you're going to be doing throughout the month and how people can connect to you, that would just be terrific.
Sure. So I really want my readers, those that have read my book, to just give me 2 to 3 minutes of their time and really talk about why the book is important. Why does it need to be read? And why should it be sent to shelters? Because there's a story, obviously, and this is my story, but so many people can relate to it. And I just think by really having that human connection, we can show the world that we're really not alone. We may feel like we're alone. We may feel like we're in the dark, but we're not. And so I've just asked my readers, give me 2 to 3 minutes of your time. Help me get the word out about my book and the mission that we're on, because together we can make a huge impact across the world. And my book actually is in 2 shelters internationally, Canada and Ireland. And so just by really, seeing the viewpoint of my readers, it's not me just talking about my story and my book all the time. It's showing that real people do relate to my book. I actually was told by a woman the other day that she read my book and it changed her life. It saved her. And I really want to connect with this woman, because I'm like, oh, I didn't know that by sharing my story, it could really have that big of an impact. I knew it could help, but I don't think we as authors really realize the impact we're making with our story.
I think that's such a good point. And one of the things on this broadcast is very international. We've had authors from Australia, from Europe, from all across the United States. And when it comes to domestic violence, this is not a U.S. issue. And one of the things is this is a global issue, and it's an issue that's not just about women, but so often they call women victims of domestic violence, but there's men who are the perpetrators. And I read a really good article recently about the fact that we put so much onus on the victims instead of the perpetrators, which is more of where it belongs. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
So women are abused, mostly abused. Women are the ones that are the victims, and we become survivors. Most of us. There are those that actually lose their life from being a victim of abuse. So 1 in 3 women, those that actually come forward. So we know 1 in 3, and men are actually victims as well. We can't forget about that. It's very important to stress that it's not just a woman's problem, and it's not really, it's a problem, but it's not the woman's fault. But there are men that are actually abused too. 1 in 4. Or 1 in 7. It shifts depending on who actually comes forward. But I really want to stress that we need to quit asking why she deserved to be abused, or what did she do to be abused. And we need to start asking, why did he choose to abuse, or why did that person choose to abuse? We need to flip the narrative, because it's very important that we take the focus on thinking the victim did something wrong, and we flip it and say, well, why did you choose to abuse? What's going on? Like, were you abused as a child? Are you mentally ill? It changes the conversation. It changes the narrative. And we really need to start allowing there to be 2 sides, right? We have the victim and we have the perpetrator. But we need to understand why they're choosing to abuse, so we can stop that cycle. Usually it comes from a childhood of abuse or assault, and we really need to flip that narrative. We really need to allow the police to do their job, the justice system to do their job for the victim, and give them the help that they need. But we also need to understand the perpetrator needs help. They also need help. And it's not that I want all the perpetrators to go rot in jail for the rest of their lives. They do deserve to be punished, but they also need to be helped, because maybe they can flip their ways and they can become advocates against domestic violence and sexual assault. And I really think we do ourselves an injustice around the world by not giving them the help that they also need.
Now, you bring up such a great point there on the fact that it's often the cycle where somebody grows up in an environment and this is what they learned. And then the other thing is people don't have the coping mechanisms, and they don't learn how to deal with anger. They don't learn how to deal with, all of the emotions that are inside them. And when you look at where we are right now with COVID, so many people are locked in their houses. So many people are with their partners 24/7. They're with their kids 24/7. And is there anything that you want to talk about on during COVID? How can families deal with these stressful situations without turning to violence? Is that anything that you've looked at all or come across as you've been on your campaigns and working with these different shelters?
It's really hard, and it's about really starting the conversation and bringing awareness, giving back, and implementing change. Those are actually my 4 pillars of my business, which all came out of writing my book. And it's really about stop putting the blinders on. Realize that there is a problem. So we are in the middle of a pandemic with COVID, but we also have a pandemic that's been going on for decades, and that's abuse. It's an epidemic. It's worldwide, and it's getting worse with COVID. And so now, we're really, as advocates of against domestic violence and sexual assault, we're really trying to bring more awareness and say, hey, this is happening, and let the victims know you're not alone. You can get help, and here's some things that you can do. And, COVID's actually a blessing in disguise. And I know that sounds a little strange, but it's actually a blessing in disguise, because say the victim does have a job and they're going out and they're going to work. They can simply tell their abuser, I've been exposed to COVID. I need to go get tested. And they're not going to be allowed, or I need to go to the hospital. I'm feeling really ill. I've got these symptoms. They're not going to be allowed back there with the victim in the hospital, because they're only allowing the person that needs to be treated back in the back. So once that victim gets away from their abuser, they can just say, hey, this is what's going on. I need your help. So there's a way to get out of those situations if you are being abused in any way. So COVID is a blessing in disguise for that aspect, but it's also really bad right now because we are, not we, but the abused are home with their monsters. They're being abused because people have lost their jobs. There's financial strain. There's, they can turn to alcohol, they can turn to drugs, and there's more abuse going on in home. And so what I stress to everybody, if you feel that somebody that's a victim or is being abused, do a wellness check. Simply say, I haven't heard from this person. I'm really concerned, and have the cops go over there. Now, that could cause a strain between your friendship, but eventually the victim will understand that you did it out of the kindness and love for them because they know that you care. They may be mad and not talk to you for a while, but if you do believe that there is a danger of somebody being abused, you need to report that. And secondly, if you are a victim and you don't know how to get help or you don't know what to do, I suggest you call a friend and talk nonsense or text nonsense. You're like, hey, remember when I told you the sky was purple? So if your friend is talking nonsense to you, that's usually a sign that they need help. If they're talking something that doesn't even ring a bell or make sense. So I usually tell people, have a code with somebody you trust and say, hey, if I mention something off the wall that doesn't make any sense, that's a sign for you to call help for me because I'm in a dangerous situation. So there's different things that you can do and different conversations you can have with loved ones to say, hey, I'm here for you. You tell me you're not abused, but I feel otherwise. If I'm wrong, thank God. But if I'm not, you need to understand I've got your back.
So all really, really good points and ways that people can help each other, ways that we can make sure that we're able to work together in this community. And so when you look at this now being a global community and ways that people could reach out, another great thing is the internet. And in fact, we have your website right here that people can reach out to, which is pretty incredible. And we have this global reach now. So I think it's really important. And I think that you hit on a couple key points about making sure that you have the code words and the networks. And it goes into kind of what we looked at in your book a little bit, is that you recognize these situations that happen to you aren't your fault, and it's perfectly fine and it's normal and healthy to get help, and it's not something that you should be ashamed of and feel like I'm going to stay in this home because I don't want people to know that this is happening to me.
So it's a very common belief system when you are a victim of abuse. You're like, because the person is narcissistic, they are manipulative, they know exactly what they're doing and what buttons to push because they tell you you're crazy. Oh, you're making that up. That didn't happen. That's not how it went down. Oh, I'll never do it again. And, it's they hide it with doing sincerity things like bringing you roses or chocolates or your favorite CD or whatever it may be. They hide it with showering you with gifts and saying, oh, I love you, I'll never do it again. So then you really do believe that you're crazy, that you're making it up. It didn't really happen. And the only confirmation that it happened is the apology afterwards. What is the action that happened after the fact? And so if you really start to second guess yourself, or you're being isolated from friends and family, you're not allowed to talk to anybody unless they're in the room with you, those are signs. But they are so good at doing it slowly and shifting your mindset into that, you need them and you're going to trust them and you're going to believe every word they say. So if they're saying you're crazy, it must be true. So, it's really having a conversation with yourself and analyzing it all and saying, okay, did this happen? What is the story I'm telling myself? This is what happened. What is the story I'm telling myself? Does it align with the story that happened? And then what is the story the abuser is saying? If there's conflict, then there's obviously something going on and we need to make sure that you're safe. It's really complicated because I really didn't think I was ever in an abusive situation. And then I went through it and I got out of it. And then I wrote my book and I'm like, whoa, I was abused here. Like all the things throughout my childhood showed that I was abused before the actual tipping point. And now I'll never, ever be abused again. But it was a lifelong lesson. I almost lost my life from it, and so I really want people to understand you're not crazy. You have nothing to be ashamed of, and you're not alone.
You have such a tremendous message there, and it's so important for people to realize they're not alone. And whether you're abused or you're just home and you're kind of feeling like, hey, this is a very hard time for depression, for domestic abuse, for all these things going on. And we had a really inspirational speaker talk about being solo doesn't mean that you're alone, like lonely, being alone, and that's perfectly healthy. So kind of to bring this back up, Erin, you really said in the beginning, like, this is a message of hope. This is a message where you can be the example. And as we're starting to wrap up this session, are there any last thoughts that you want to leave to those who are watching and those who are going to be watching the recording later?
Absolutely. So regardless of what you've been through, you're not alone. You have nothing to be ashamed of. And the moment you take 100% responsibility, regardless of whose fault it is, I want to stress that regardless of whose fault it is, the moment you take 100% responsibility is the moment you can change it. And you are not defined by your circumstances. You're a badass.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate your time today. You are out there in Colorado, so you still have about half your day left. And I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, the fact that you're willing to share this story with so many people, the work that you're doing, this crusade that you're on, it is touching, it is moving. And I look at you as this elephant, and I mean, you are certainly 100% a badass. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And just for your watchers, I am giving a free Kindle edition of my book. So I'll be doing a drawing on that for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.